Hi, and welcome to Dipping and Out with Lucy, the podcast that opens up the discussion around domestic abuse. I'm here this morning with Monika Labich, and she is a specialist, alcohol dependency specialist and counsellor. And Monika, if you want to explain a bit about how long you've been doing this role and anything else you'd like to say about it.
Hello, Lucy. Thank you for having me. So yes, I work predominantly in my private practice with alcohol dependency. This is my main interest. So I thought I'm not going to muddle up my interest and what I do in my private practice since I can choose. So I thought I'm going to support people with alcohol dependency only. I also have a day job, which is with drug and alcohol services in community, where we support all variety of drugs that we might come across. And we're just trying to support everyone who would like to learn a little bit and find out what can be done. So what is great about these both services is we never put any pressure on people to make any changes.
Yeah.
So we can explore, we can support, we can tell what are the options, we can show the options, we can talk you through it and walk with you, but there is no expectation for you to make any decisions or any changes that we think might be useful for you to know about. I also trying to raise awareness in Polish community about the effects of alcohol and how it can play the role in domestic abuse. In the past, I did webinars with Vesta, which is a Polish charity supporting Polish community affected by domestic abuse. So that was quite interesting experience as well to do it and give a little bit of the information that might be missing in our community.
Absolutely. And I was going to say the resources for Vesta, and I think, is it Opaka? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, it's Vesta and Opaka as well. They are the most, I think, well-known in UK that are extremely supportive, fearless, and they're just unstoppable in supporting people with problems with around domestic abuse.
Yeah, no, it's on the website as well on ydom.co.uk. There's on the resources page. You can find those links there. Because it is important, and especially if you're, in a country where it isn't necessarily, you may speak English, but actually in terms of your own language and wanting to be able to communicate, it's very, very difficult. And if you add drug and alcohol addiction, domestic abuse into the mix, then that's quite a scary prospect, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, working with minorities, any kind of minorities, it's quite difficult because you need to understand the in and outs. And when there are cultural differences and language barrier, that is almost impossible to get the point across, from one side to another. You might have an amazing professional, but if they don't understand the cultural background, if the person looking for support cannot communicate freely, then it's a massive barrier to access support and understand what the support really is.
Yeah,
because there's a lot of misconception that, for example, the children will be taken away from me if social services going to be involved in supporting our family, or if I speak up, I might lose my job. The school will know, what people will say. There's already stigma around, Eastern European, they drinking a lot and all these sort of things we have in mind when we think about different cultures. And I think that what is actually stopping people from speaking up. So having specialist service that is supporting people in their spoken language, the first language, and they understand the cultural background and the cultural reasons for things happening. I think that is a massively important thing to have in place.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, when you were just saying that then about the possibility you feel that you may lose your children or your job, and when I was talking with Tony Blockley, who's head of he's a professor of criminology at Leeds Trinity University, we were talking the other day and saying, across the board, again, it's almost universal, this idea of your children being taken away. It's a very, very scary prospect. And I think one thing that is also universal is this idea that domestic abuse is caused by, you know, drug and alcohol addiction. And that was going to be one of the first questions I was going to ask you, obviously, as a specialist, is, you know, when you hear these conversations, and I've heard them myself, oh, well, obviously he's an alcoholic or she's an alcoholic, or, you know, oh, well, they're addicted to cocaine, whatever the drug may be, I don't know. But it's almost like it's giving the perpetrator somewhere to hide because it's making excuses. I could be wrong, but that's the impression I get, is it's almost giving them a reason to be abusive, whereas in my mind, an abuser is an abuser, regardless of what other substances they may be. It may enhance the problem, it may escalate the problem. But what would you say as a specialist in that area?
Alcohol and any other substance dependency is not a core or, you know, reason for domestic abuse or any other abuse. This is the behavior on the perpetrator.
Yeah.
Alcohol, other substances, they might enhance the aggressive behavior, and might, you know, you drink a lot, you cannot control your responses as much. You are more reactive, you might misinterpret situations or what being said. You might act on your, I don't know, flashback, previous experience, and you might project something certain happening, or you might use alcohol as actually, you know, a starting point of domestic abuse incident. Okay, I was drunk and that's why I did it, so you cannot really blame me. Alcohol is very often a massive part of domestic abuse, and not only physical, emotional abuse is the massive problem. And, you know, we're talking about two topics that are extremely shameful. No one really wants to say they have a problem with alcohol. They will be called drunk, alcoholic, addict, or whatever else. There is so much stigma around how we call people with this certain problem. But also domestic abuse is extremely shameful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so
and you
true.
know, and how you going to it's difficult to address one. How are you going to address both at the same time? And then you have that fear, what people will say, what's going to happen to my family if other services get involved? What if I fail? What if I cannot leave the relationship? Or what if I relapse? Or, you know, it's so multi-layered. It's kind of, you know, we could talk for days about it, but alcohol also can be a form of control. If we're thinking that someone has alcohol dependency, you know, restricting access to alcohol might be a form of abuse as well, or talking someone into drinking so they're much easier to control, so they're going to lose the job and they cannot support themselves. So when you don't have that independence, I mean, alcohol and other substances, it can be a very powerful tool to control someone's life.
God, yeah. And that's just got me thinking as well of the flip side. If, like so many of us, you know, you go through and experience certain things in life that are traumatic, that are life altering, there will be people who use alcohol as a form of, I suppose, numbing the pain, if you like.
Coping.
So there's the flip side. So you've got the perpetrator, you know, alcohol and drugs, and you've also potentially got the victim who maybe that's their way of coping with the situation that they're in. So it's a very, very complex.
Yeah, it's extremely complex, and you know, sometimes a victim of domestic abuse might be kind of encouraging the perpetrator to drink more, because when they pass out, they're not going to be abused. Okay, so it's very gray area when we're talking, oh, if they stop drinking or they stop using, that there won't be any problem, everything's going to be fine. It's not. It's psychological. With domestic abuse is about the behavior and the abuse and the need of controlling someone else.
Yeah.
And if that was just about alcohol, people who don't drink wouldn't be abusers. They are.
Yeah, yeah, and this is
if that was that easy.
well, this is it. At the core, like you said earlier, at the core of it all, someone who is abusive,
Yeah.
for whatever those reasons are, whether it's, talking again with Tony Blockley about this, about in terms of if you've lived in a household, maybe when you were growing up, in terms of the learned behavior, maybe if you are abusive, you're abusive. But if you then add all these other things around it, there could be issues at work. So they think, oh, go home, have a drink, that'll solve the problem, kind of thing. And it's a very difficult situation, I think. And do you find that you would have more, say, would victims open up to you and say, the reason I am drinking, in terms of alcohol and drug addiction, I'm doing this because of the situation I'm in? Or is it more you just sort of spot the signs?
I think it's more about spotting signs and how to bring them up in a conversation. We need to remember that people who are being, they're experiencing domestic abuse, they are scared, they're very vulnerable, they're being told not to talk about it. So when they're being presented with professional and service, there is a massive power imbalance. And you have the power imbalance at home, and then you go in looking for help, and you have another power imbalance of power again. So it's really tricky, and it's really need to be carefully introduced to point out or kind of suggest there might be issues, around it. And sometimes, we say we support people, like in my day job or in my private practice, we support people with substance dependency. If you look a little bit underneath, it's everything. It's childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, bullying, school, at work. There's so much past playing role in the substance dependency that it's impossible not to address it. Because at some point you need to address what is the core issue, because alcohol or substance dependency this is like a red flag, something is wrong. It's not very often when someone says, oh, I'm really happy, it was just a social drinking, there's nothing wrong in my life and I cannot stop drinking. That is a completely different group of people.
Yeah.
Majority of people who come and trying to get some support or answers is they have something happening in their life and they're trying to cope with the outcomes of it using alcohol.
Yeah.
So we need to, as a drug and alcohol professionals, we need to know about it all.
Yeah.
And we need to be comfortable talking about it, because quite often people come to us and they have it's not a confidence, they have no belief they can do it, that they can make changes, the situation can change. So we have to hold, the power, but we also have to keep this confidence, and they actually borrowing, the confidence and belief of us, and hope start growing, and people starting to believe maybe I can make small changes.
Yeah, because it's like that image you see, isn't it? Of the iceberg. So you see the tip of it, and actually what's underneath is a lot's there.
And you never know what you're going to find there. But if we talk about the childhood experience, drinking is normalized. Domestic abuse, I'm going to say it, and maybe there's going to be a backlash, but it's acceptable in a society. No one wants to address it. So in that respect, it's almost like socially accepted that the abuse is there. Not necessarily that abuse is happening, but society is accepting it's there. It's so big, we don't really know what to do with. I'm sure it doesn't, it doesn't apply to me, and I'm sure I don't know anyone
That's a biggie.
who would be abused. So I can't really take a stand. I can't do anything about it. And then we have children growing up in a home that is very dysfunctional on many levels. So what they learn at home, they take it with them throughout their life. They are adults, and unconsciously, they might repeat the same unhealthy behavior. So if they learn that shouting, screaming, hitting is the right response, it's not really a response, it's a reaction. But they might see it as a way of communicating that actually that's how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we have children who, they might be living in a house when there is a financial, difficulties, and they're not going to have breakfast at home before they go to school. They're hungry, they can't concentrate, they might be sleep deprived, and they cannot concentrate because something happened at home and the sleep was disrupted, and they're basically on alert, trying to figure it out, am I safe or not? They go to school and they cannot perform as well as other children who would have that safety net around them. Yeah. So we're looking at an adult who has alcohol problem and I'm thinking, oh my God, just stop drinking, sort out your life, try harder, get a grip, get a job, and everything will be fine,
Yeah.
No, we cannot just see that adult. We need to know what happens and what led them to that point of life that actually alcohol took over. Yeah. Because it's not a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
People might pick up the first drink, they might drink, socially and everything, but this is very progressive. It's very subtle progress when alcohol actually is taking over your life. And one day you wake up and you're thinking like, holy shit, what happened to me? Sorry.
No, it's right. Listen, everybody, I don't mind it at all. It's perfect.
Because it's in your face, it's like in your face, what happened to my life?
And isn't that when you've just said that there about it's happening sort of so slowly with alcohol, say as an example, and it's exactly the same with domestic abuse. That's happening so slowly, and so if the two are running side by side, that's a scary thought, isn't it? And that's why I think you're 100% right. So many people think, well, it doesn't affect me, so it's not my problem. It doesn't affect me, so I don't need to think about it. And actually, there will be a percentage of those people that it actually is affecting. They just don't know it, and they don't want to admit it to themselves, and they probably don't even recognize it because that to them is normal behavior, drinking as much. But I mean, I don't understand the term, but you hear this term functioning alcoholic, don't you, where somebody could go to work, they could be, but then go home and drink God knows what, I don't know, but get to that point where, but also if there's and the abuse on top of that. I think there's many people out there that think it doesn't apply to them, and actually there will be people that it does apply to. They just don't realize it at this point in time.
Yeah, and if you think about it, there's not much understanding of the real understanding of domestic abuse. So we know the idea of domestic abuse, but we don't necessarily understand how it works, how it functions, what it needs to thrive. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then people don't have much understanding what actually is causing alcohol, what it means, what it causes, what it does to person, what happened that they're drinking, how their body is reacting not to have alcohol. Because you see, another element is, if we're talking about the great drinking, so for example, we have the professional, they still work, they're picking the children from school, they can cook, they keep all these functions that we expect them to hold, all these responsibilities, but they might be drinking much more, and it's not social anymore. It's actually playing the role of, if I don't drink, I won't be able to complete everything that I have, all the tasks I planned or were put on me throughout the day. So that is the very gray area of this functioning alcoholic, which I kind of like to say gray area, trying to avoid the word alcoholic. Some people are comfortable with it, but usually there's a lot of stigma around word alcoholic, and sometimes people say, no, I can be called alcoholic, but then it's like, if you talk a little bit more and get to the bottom of it, it's like, well, actually I feel I deserve to be called an alcoholic. So they kind of, we could talk about the nitty-gritty of everything for like 2 days if you let me. But the thing is, it's not as much how you drink or how much you drink, it's how it's affecting your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I'm just thinking then about if I'd been out with friends or something, and you've had a few glasses of wine or something. I wouldn't be any use to anybody. I wouldn't be able to, I just couldn't do it. And at my age now, I can't. I'm 45. I haven't got the time or the inclination to get to that point.
Or
I'm
ability to recover, and drink all night and then go to work. Are you kidding me?
Then to think that somebody
that would never
Then to think they could, go to work, do all they do, children. Oh God. That in itself must be exhausting.
Yeah,
that must be exhausting.
Alcohol has a massive effect on body, and with the time, if you drink regularly, you will develop tolerance to alcohol. So when I was saying it's progressive, it's you will need with the time, and not everyone will end up with alcohol dependency. Okay, but majority people might, if they're doing it regularly and they're drinking for reasons that they're trying to numb their feelings, or they're trying to cope with anxiety or pressures and things like this. So when you get to the point when it's actually your alcohol tolerance goes up, you need to drink more and more to get the same effect, right? And then at some point you are not getting that effect anymore at all, because you cross that point of not having that nice hit of being tipsy and happy and feeling relaxed and everything, And that's where the problems start, because when you get to physical dependency and you restrict access to alcohol for that person, that can be very dangerous.
And that's something I was just going to say as well, that I've only heard a little bit about it, and that's obviously where you are the specialist, that it's very dangerous if somebody was an alcoholic. It's very, very dangerous to then say, right, that, if cut it out altogether. It actually could be quite life-threatening, as that's the understanding I have. It depending obviously on the person, I would imagine, but
I think the risk is for every person. The withdrawals might be slightly different depending on the person, as you say, but the withdrawals are really, really difficult to cope with, very debilitating, and also there is a risk to life, because you might end up with a seizure, you might die if it happens. So we never really recommend to stop drinking completely if you have that dependency, and even if you do, if your body is giving you any symptoms, any signals that it's going into a shock, and you have shaky hands and you can't concentrate and you feel nauseous, or you kind of, your body shakes and you sweat and you feel very, very unsettled, it means that you have physical alcohol dependency. Wow. It means that you need to drink a little bit to settle it down, so your body will not go into a shock. And that's where another difficulty is for a person to actually, when they realize, I have to drink now, I don't want to anymore, but unfortunately I have to continue until I get slowly detoxed, or I just go for a detox to private rehab program or something. So it's very easy to cross that line, and it's very sneaky. It's very subtle progress, so it's difficult to really catch it sometimes on time. So I think it's the safest way is just slowly reduce, and it also giving you that, you have that comfort. You have that bubble around you that alcohol gives you, but you are slowly coming out of the comfort zone, and you're trying to organize your life and prepare yourself for not drinking, because that is going to be completely different life. You don't have the coping mechanism that you had for years, for example, and you need to cope with all the emotions, memory,
changing the pattern of
how you. Everything's coming to the surface. Your nervous system need to learn how to cope with life without having that support from alcohol. So it's a preparation. When I reduce alcohol with someone, it's like, this is the preparation. This is the time for you to figure it out, what you need, what was missing, what you neglected in your life, what you want to keep in your life, and what you need to give up.
Oh God, yeah. And
It's a full-time job, Lucy. It's a full-time job, and I don't think people realize your brain is basically working overtime.
Yeah. And it's and you would, you know, say if you had a pattern, like you were saying before, it could be that somebody comes either in from work or whatever, or it's the weekend, I don't know, but they, you know, and alcohol is part of that, then that's part of that pattern. And if you've been doing that for a very, very long time, to have to then start to amend that pattern, if you like, not change it all together at once, because like you said, it's a slow kind of burn, slow progress, but to then have to amend that pattern to your life must be really scary. That's the word that's coming to mind. It must be very frightening, because you've used alcohol, say, as like your safety net. You know, that's like you say, it's to numb the pain, it's to numb the feelings, it's to say that, you know, you're going to reduce that, not necessarily take it away, but even reduce it, must be a really frightening prospect. And I would imagine, is it the same with drug addiction as well? Then you wouldn't automatically say, that's it, whatever. I don't know anything about drugs, I have to admit, so
we'll have to talk about different drugs, you know, individually, so we're not going to dive into it. I mean, heroin is one of the drugs that it's very unpleasant and you know, quite risky to just stop using. So but there are medication that we can use to replace heroin with, you know, the methadone, the Subutex, and other aspirin, or the other things that we could prescribe, and kind of try to give a little bit structure. And it's almost like a harm reduction, you know, because they are not exposing themselves to risky behavior, or to injecting, or to buying drugs when you don't know what really is in a bag when you buy it, because it's not you know, it's not produced in a laboratory or anything. You don't know where it comes from. You don't know what it's cut with. But you know, when you were talking about, you know, how scary it is to make changes around drinking, how scary it is to make changes about domestic abuse, how scary it is to leave, to even think about it, right? And you know, it might be for various reasons, but again, how scary it is to make changes, like life-altering changes.
So if you're, for example, a victim or survivor of domestic abuse, and those are the two terms we tend to use more than anything. I'm sure there's probably, when I was talking to Alice Smith recently, there's a third one that we need, apart from, you know, when you feel like you've moved on from survivor, we need another one. But in the meantime, you know, when you're, say, for example, if you are finding that your life is moving forward slowly, one step at a time, then if you've also got alcohol addiction in with that, and you're also trying to move forward from the experience of domestic abuse and all the trauma that comes with, and all the issues and problems, that is, I mean, how much support must people need? Huge
amount. And you don't often get it, you know. I mean, think about the relatives of people who are having alcohol dependency. They are trying to be supportive to start with, or, you know, throughout the whole recovery period. But at some point, they need support as well, because alcohol is not affecting just the person who drinks. It has a, you know, it has the ability to destroy the whole family. It will affect children. It will affect the you know, your spouse and everything. But with that is also when family doesn't have right information how to support someone recover in a healthy way. They will have idea of what needs to be done, what they need to say, which is not useful. It's not helpful. It actually increase the stigma, increase the guilt and shame and everything else. It's you know, nagging, checking, controlling, taking the credit cards away, breathalyzing. And that's what I always say. It's really important that family takes part in some sort of therapeutic support and therapy, because they need to figure it out, how to trust, or how to walk away, or how to accept this is the situation and how I'm going to cope with it with relatively sane way, that it's not going to affect me to the point that I am a wreck of the person as well. Because again, that is a very, codependency and everything. This is a very, very subtle progress as well. So if you look at the general, from the general level, it's domestic abuse and alcohol. There is a lot of similarities.
There are. And I don't think, to be honest, until we've spoken this morning, I don't think I appreciated just how similar so many aspects are. There's so many similarities in terms of how to try and move forward and how to try and deal with things. Because like you say, with family, it's a really difficult one because, they've, even if it's your extended family, for example, they've been living with the situation, whether it's that you've been in a domestically abused situation or the alcohol or drug addiction. And, for them, it's so difficult to sort of almost learn to listen. I think I remember hearing that once from a professional, and somebody was asking the question, how do I go about supporting them? I don't know what to do. And they were saying, if you just listen, instead of trying to have all the answers, you don't know what that situation is because you've never had to go through it yourself. You might be a bystander and it's you're watching it unfold, but it's not actually happening to you. So sometimes I think it's important, isn't it, that family, friends, work colleagues even, that they just observe sometimes of, like you were saying before about the signs, sometimes it's a case of it's the things that they're not saying, isn't it? And again, Tony Blockley touched on that the other day. It's the things people don't say that very often lead to the things that come to light and think, okay, it makes sense now. And it is difficult. And I think one for me was always, I know. If somebody says, I know, and they do the head tilt to the side, I know. And you think, no, you don't. You don't know. It's the worst thing you can say.
Yes.
But it is important. You're right. And if we're not even supporting domestic abuse victims and survivors, and those obviously included in that with alcohol and drug addiction, we're not supporting the families. They're not even on the radar. The friends, the work, it's not even on the radar. And that's frightening because, you need your support network around you, whoever that may be, in whatever form that comes in. It is important to have support, isn't it?
Yeah. And, it doesn't just, because we talk a lot about, people who are underprivileged. The domestic abuse and alcohol dependency happens in wealthy families as well. It doesn't discriminate. It's there. And how quite often it's been covered up and like this, not dismissed, but the excuses we give in for people who are doing well and they drink. Okay, people who have unprivileged life, they don't have that. There is much more stigma. So there's the element of having different possibilities in life and being born in a different class. You will get a different response and different I think stigma and less forgiving attitude that people will present you with. It's very damaging. I think both are very common, domestic abuse and alcohol abuse, and unfortunately it seems that there is no way out of it because everyone knows it's there, but how we going to move forward? How are we going to convince people to do it if you don't know it's happening? Because quite often you are in domestic, abusive relationship, you don't know that you are in one, okay? Yeah. And you might have problem with alcohol. Everyone will tell you around you need to do something, but you don't see it.
You don't see it. And you can't, the one thing, like you were saying at the very beginning as well, is you can't force people, can you? And again, there's another similarity. So those with alcohol and drug addiction, those who have experienced domestic abuse or are experiencing it right now, you cannot force someone into making a decision saying, well, you need to leave. You can't do, and actually in instances that I've experienced in the past with people, they do stay. They want to know how to keep themselves safe and they want to work out how they can remain safe, but they don't want to leave the perpetrator. They don't want to leave the abuser. And society looks at that and says, oh my God, why wouldn't you just want to leave? Well, you can't judge by your own standards, can you?
It's the unknown, isn't it? I mean, abuse will not stop only because someone leaves.
Mm.
The abuse can go on, and it doesn't resolve anything. You might not have financial independency.
Exactly.
You cannot go freely wherever because you're thinking they might be watching you.
Yeah.
You might not be able to support your children. You have to change the school for your children, because another thing is that it's usually the victim of domestic abuse is being expected to leave, change their life, move somewhere else when they don't know anyone, they don't have friends.
No.
They don't even know the town or the city, and you're supposed to be happy because you left. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
And grateful. You know, this is the thing. You're supposed to be grateful. Well, you're living in a different. Yeah, but you've got no support network. So, and you're leaving your family behind, who are then in a lot of these situations, you're leaving your family behind, who are living in the same area as the perpetrator. Then, so you're almost leaving your family. So what do you do then? You can't take, your mother and father and grandparents and everybody else with you. It's not, the answer is not to remove the victim from the area. That I don't think that's the answer. I think it's the easy option. And again, it was something that I talked with Tony Blockley about the other day in the podcast, and we were saying how is it because the victim is the more pliable one, the one that you can just say, look, you need to be out of this situation, but the perpetrator, you don't want to get involved trying to
isn't it easier to control victim and tell them what to do? I mean, isn't it the continuity of the control? This is what you have to do, that's how it needs to be done. If you're ready, that we're going to do it this and this way,
and that's still control. So the victim's still being
because
controlled.
this is this imbalance of the power that we have here, which the victim quite often might not be even fully aware that is going on, because they are still in a mode, I need to leave my perpetrator, I need to leave my abuse because I'm not safe, so I'm going to compromise on everything else and I'm gonna go. And when I say everything else, I'm thinking this the fake sense of security that they might have in a home. They know, and they know what to expect. They know how to control the perpetrator behavior to some point, right? So they live in everything they know, and that tiny little, part of control they have in life, and then being moved to somewhere else when they don't know anyone.
It's so dangerous as well. It's so dangerous because that in itself could put you in a situation where you feel you need a dependency of some sort, whether it is alcohol or drug, because who is there to support you? And especially if you've got children, we're very quick to judge those who are going through alcohol and drug addiction, but you don't know the full picture, and that's the difficulty, isn't it? We don't know the full story, and until you start digging under that iceberg, you're never going to know, are you?
But also, what I had to learn, because I'm trained counselor, and I started like 8 years ago. And I remember when I started on my placement, how difficult it was for me to kind of give them that autonomy, to actually be here as a person who wants to support without having this quite often, subconscious need to change their life for better.
For them, yeah.
and it's kind of like, why they, I understand you don't wanna. I understand, you don't understand because you're not in their head, so you don't really know the reasons, but you kind of feel like you understand and you want to help them and they are here. So you kind of putting your expectations on that person and thinking, so this is going to do, that's how it's going to be, they're going to be, happy, cured and everything else. No, it's not. And just kind of, I think that was the biggest learning for me, just giving them autonomy and accepting that some people might not want to stop drinking.
And that
some people might want to stay in domestic abuse relationship.
It's so true.
They have the reasons, they have valid reasons to do it. And it's, from the professional point of view, someone who's outside of the situation, it's quite, I'm not going to easy, but it's easier to kind of say, okay, if that's how you want to do it, I can give you harm reduction advice, for example, or, if at any point your drinking takes you to situation that you're feeling very ill, you have seizure or whatever, you're not feeling well, you need to call the ambulance or whatever. So trying to prepare the
Put things in
plan for
place.
the emergency and put things in place so that person can, they're not going to change their behavior, but they can take the safety steps to minimize the risks. And that is, I think, the biggest difficulty is because the family doesn't really have that opportunity. They don't have that easy exit, as I'm going to say, that professional has, because that person stays in their life. There's emotional attachment, which as a professional I don't form with my clients. So it's easy for me to actually step back and say, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's what we're going to do. If you want to reduce drinking, yes, I can support you with doing it, and you're going to lead the sport because it's not my choice. It's not my life. I don't know how that person feels. Okay. I don't know how they're going to feel when they make the changes.
And it's giving them that control, isn't it, back? Almost.
Yes. So I always say I can walk next to you, but you are the one who actually have the voice to say, no, we're not doing it because it doesn't work. So then I'm going to probably say, out of the curiosity, is it because it's stopping you drinking, or is it because it doesn't fit into your personality in your life? Because if you're going to make the lasting changes, it has to agree with you. Okay. Yes, they need to come out of the comfort zone, but they also, it needs to fit in their personality. It needs to fit in their lifestyle, what they like.
And it's like you say again, it is those similarities between the two. It is so similar when you're trying to give that control and power back to a victim of domestic abuse as well, because it's so much of that control over their life has been taken away for so long that it is never, it's not like you see in the films, isn't it? And it's all done and dusted, wonderful, marvelous. No, it
that would be right.
Exactly. It takes years, it takes decades, it can take, more often than not, the rest of your life having a certain plan in place for yourself to think, okay, when I feel like I'm falling into that pit, or I feel like I'm, blaming myself about the abuse, whatever it is, that you have something in place to say to yourself, okay, right, step back from the situation for a minute. Remember that you are not to blame, that you can forgive yourself, all these elements that are so important. And again, the same with drug and alcohol. I hadn't even thought about when we started this morning. My first thing was, people talk about how, drug and alcohol addiction, part of domestic abuse, but actually you don't realize how much they run alongside each other. Very, very, very similar.
It really took me a few years to kind of connect the dots.
Yeah.
How many similarities there is, and I'm absolutely not saying they are the same. Absolutely not. But some of the mechanisms that is happening to us are quite similar.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and when you add, minorities or people who might not speak a really good English, and they are here, their access, the ability to find the services that could be supportive is very limited, because it's different to speak up in day-to-day life, go to work and to shopping and things like this. If you don't try to assimilate with the culture and language that you in the country that you live in, that is another limitation. If you get disabilities into consideration.
Absolutely.
How difficult is that?
And and if you are in a situation where you wouldn't necessarily know that Vesta exists, or OPA does, you didn't know they existed, they are support networks there for you that are within your own framework, if you like, of your culture and your understanding of how your culture has developed over centuries. And it's important to have those kind of support networks there, but it's how we get that message out there that there is support. That's the difficulty, isn't it? I think, because it's okay putting them,
talk about it,
it's the talking,
just seriously talk about it, because I didn't realize they existed really until one evening I got really bored and I was thinking, right, I need to do something because I need a little project to keep me going and to whatever. You know what you do. You have 5 different projects, but you need a 6th one just to hit that sweet spot that you keep you happy and exhausted and everything, but you feel like you achieved something. So I started looking for how to maybe give some information to Polish community in England, because I had few clients who had quite a difficulty to engage and recover in this meaningful level and meaningful conversation about previous experience, feelings. That takes another I think skill that you need to have to freely talk about it. And I thought, why don't we do webinars, or maybe I could just be a counselor and and just support people, and started with one email, one session. Like, oh my gosh, they are here, they are doing great job, and everything. So I just sent email and I said, well, this is how I am, that's what I want to do. Do you want to work with me or not? Like really? As simple as that. And from one conversation to another, it's like, should we do a webinars and actually get the point across? I get the point, yeah. We did with another Polish lady, which apologies, I don't remember her surname on top of my head, but she did part of, how it's affecting families, the codependency, the children and everything. Wow. So it was very kind of, comprehensive piece of work that actually, if someone watched it, might get much more understanding of both domestic abuse, how it affects the relationships, and how the alcohol can affect the person and families as well. But with disabilities, if you think about autistic people, autistic females, there's another layer of difficulty, and I think they are more at risk to end up in abusive relationship. And there's still things that come to my mind, but it's autistic people or people who are different, and not necessarily just within the neurodiversity, and it's been really talked a lot. But if you are a little bit different, you kind of accustom yourself to feeling uncomfortable. So if you feel uncomfortable your whole life and you end up in a relationship that's making you uncomfortable as well, you might really quite easily miss on the red flags that they are there, which we know they are not red. I call them pink because they're so faded. I remember that, And people around you might not even see it. And then so slow. Yes, but then you should, you should, because, you should be smarter than all of us. And a lot of things that, believing what people say as well. So if autistic person, if you say something, they will most often believe that's what it is. There must be quite easy to miss the cues, like the body language and everything, and you might think something is wrong, but you don't necessarily know what it is. And if someone's speaking for them, or they're very much in control then, aren't they? Yeah. And people with disabilities, they quite often they're not in full-time employment. That might be really difficult to leave abusive relationship as well if you don't have an ability to support yourself. Change might be incredibly difficult as well, and very challenging, even if it's a positive change to routine, to something that they used to know, and they could care for you, That might be very, very scary to do. So it's, the more we know about neurodiversity, the more we learn about minorities, I think it's just adding to another like multi-layer of the problem, and how actually someone's life could be difficult staying in, using alcohol or staying in domestic abuse, but it actually might feel impossible to make changes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more we do have these conversations, the more that we talk about it, I think
it does help, even in the smallest way, to reduce that stigma, because it is not anything to be ashamed of talking about. And I often say that there is absolutely no shame in talking about it. There's no shame in talking about drug and alcohol addiction. There's absolutely, the more we do it, the more we open up that conversation. And I think if there was one question, I was just thinking if there's any one question I could ask you, I think the one I was asking myself the other day was, and I do like this idea, is in terms of a professional, what would be the one piece of advice you would give to somebody, say, for example, if obviously from your specialism in terms of drug and alcohol addiction, if they were looking for support, or they were thinking, actually, I do need some help, I just don't know where to begin. That's usually the thing, isn't it? It's the jumping off point, like, where do I even start? If you could give one piece of advice, what would you think?
I would say if you really wanna change something or just have a chat, you can use Google.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Local drug and alcohol service. You can go to GP, you can go to job center, you can go to church, you can ask at school, work. There's a lot of employment. Yeah. It's there.
It's there.
Okay. Yeah. You can find a private counselor if you can afford it and if you think that would be better for you. Mm-hmm. Most of counselors will, including me, offer free introduction session intro, and you can actually speak to the person. You can tell them a little bit what's going on, and you can feel the vibe, okay? Because it's very important that you're being supported by someone who you actually feel comfortable talking to.
Yeah. That's it.
Without that, it's really difficult. And I know that if someone chooses to go to community service and you ask, can I have informal chat? Mm. I don't want to be open. I don't know if I need it, but I just need a little bit of advice. Can just someone call me? And I can then have a little bit more information and understanding, and then decide. They will give you that call. They will give you that contact. Yeah. So if you think there is a problem, just talk about it. Just talk.
And it's so simple, isn't it? It's such an easy concept in some ways, is just to talk. And I think,
if just to add, if people telling you that, you might be drinking too much or whatever, or if you have a feeling like, oh, right, so there's a whole bottle I finished yesterday and that haven't happened really before, then I would say, you might have a problem, or you might be on the way to have a problem with alcohol. So just try to catch it and try to make changes before it gets to physical dependency, because it's so much easier to do it before you cross that line.
That line where there's there is going back, but it's going to take a long process to get there. And if you can sort of head it off at the pass almost, then that would be amazing. But I just wanted to say thank you so much, because I've learned.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm going to be an encyclopedia by the end of all this. I'm going to know so much about every aspect. It's amazing. But no, thank you so much, because it is so important to get that conversation out there. And again, it is another one that people find very difficult to talk about, but look how easy we've made it.
Yeah.
We've made it look so simple.
Yes. And just normalizing that actually people have problems.
Yeah.
Many, people experience mental health problems, and we never know what is really going on in people's lives. So don't judge before you really know, because it can be very hurtful, and it's actually not helping anyone.
No, and I think that's perfect. How could we end it any better than that? She's right. Don't judge. Thank you so much, Monika. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.